There may be a major shift taking place inside the royal family, and if the latest reports are accurate, Prince William and Catherine may be facing a situation they never expected. For years, the balance of power appeared remarkably clear. King Charles was the father of the center of the family. Prince William was the future king. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were living thousands of miles away in California, having stepped back from royal duties and built an entirely different life. But now, something appears to be changing. A new report published on August 14 claims that an invitation to Balmoral may have been extended to Harry and Meghan, potentially creating a moment that could completely change the dynamic between the Sussexes and the Welses. And according to a source quoted in the report, Meghan allegedly sees this development as proof of something she has believed for years, that she and Harry were never the real problem. That the relationship between the Sussexes and the royal family was shaped by a much deeper conflict. And perhaps most importantly, that King Charles may now be willing to move forward with his son and his grandchildren, even if that means going against the preferences of Prince William and Catherine. But there is a crucial question. Is this really a victory for Harry and Meghan? Or could it create an even deeper divide inside the royal family? Because if Charles truly is opening the door wider to his youngest son, September could become one of the most significant moments in the royal story in years. The story begins with Balmoral. For generations, Balmoral has been one of the most important private residences associated with the British royal family. It is a place where the Windsors traditionally gather away from the formal pressures of London. And that is precisely why an invitation to Balmoral would carry such enormous significance. It would not simply be another royal engagement. It would be a private family gathering. A place where Charles could potentially spend meaningful time with Harry, Meghan and their children away from the formal atmosphere of a public ceremony. According to the report published on August 14, newer insiders claim that an invitation to Balmoral has already been extended ahead of September. That claim has not been publicly confirmed by Buckingham Palace. And that distinction is important. Much of the current story is based on unnamed sources and reports from royal publications. So we should not treat the alleged invitation as an established fact until the palace confirms it. But the possibility alone is enough to raise an extraordinary question. What would happen if Harry and Meghan actually returned to Balmoral? Because the significance would go far beyond one family weekend. It would represent a very different approach to Harry's relationship with his father. For years, reports surrounding the Sussexes and the royal family have been dominated by distance. But more recently, the relationship between Harry and King Charles has appeared to show signs of movement. The two have reportedly maintained contact. Harry has previously expressed his desire to rebuild his relationship with his father. And earlier this year, the possibility of further family meetings began attracting increasing attention. Now, according to the latest report, the next step could potentially be Balmoral. And if Harry, Meghan and their children were welcomed there, the symbolism would be impossible to ignore. Because this would mean something very different from simply allowing Charles to speak privately with his son. It would mean potentially bringing Harry's entire immediate family back into the king's private family circle. That is where Prince William and Catherine enter the story. According to the report, sources have previously claimed that William is not necessarily opposed to his father developing a relationship with Harry. But there is reportedly a preference for the relationship to remain private. And, crucially, without invitations to wider family events. If that characterization is accurate, the alleged Balmoral invitation could represent a significant departure from the preference. It would mean that Charles was not simply maintaining a private relationship with Harry. He could be actively reintegrating him into a family environment. And that is precisely what could make the situation so uncomfortable. Because the relationship between William and Harry remains one of the most difficult unresolved issues within the royal family. The brothers grew up together. They experienced the death of their mother together. They supported one another through some of the most difficult moments of their childhood. For years, they were presented as an inseparable royal partnership. But the relationship eventually fractured. Harry left royal life. He and Meghan moved to the United States. The distance between the brothers grew. And the public revelations that followed made reconciliation even more complicated. Since then, the possibility of William and Harry rebuilding their relationship has remained one of the most closely watched questions surrounding the monarchy. But what if reconciliation does not begin with the brothers? What if it begins with Charles? That could be exactly what is happening now. According to the latest report, Meghan allegedly sees the current situation as confirmation of something she has believed for years. The source claims that Meghan feels the behavior of William and Catherine proves that she and Harry were never the problem. The source further alleges that Meghan believes she and Harry were singled out and bullied by members of the royal family, with William and Catherine allegedly playing a significant role. These are serious claims, but they remain claims attributed to an unnamed source. There's no public evidence establishing every part of that account as fact, and neither William nor Catherine has publicly accepted the characterization presented in the report. That distinction is extremely important. But regardless of whether the allegations are accurate, they reveal something significant about how the Sussex story continues to be understood. There are still two very different narratives surrounding what happened. From the Sussex perspective, there has long been a sense that Harry and Meghan were treated unfairly inside the institution. From the other side, the story has been far more complicated, with questions surrounding trust, privacy, public criticism and the decision by the Sussexes to step away. And now, years later, those competing interpretations have not disappeared. They have simply changed form. According to the latest report, Meghan allegedly believes that the fact Charles is now willing to rebuild a relationship with Harry and his grandchildren proves that the Sussexes were not solely responsible for the family breakdown. And that is where the phrase humble pie enters the story. The report claims that Meghan feels William and Catherine are now being forced to swallow some humble pie. It is an extremely dramatic characterization. But what does it actually mean? Essentially, the suggestion is that Meghan believes the balance of power has changed. For years, William was the future king. Harry had stepped away from the institution. William remained at the center of the monarchy. Harry and Meghan were building a new life in America. From the outside, that appeared to place William and Catherine in the stronger institutional position. But a relationship between a father and his son does not necessarily follow institutional rules. King Charles is both the monarch and Harry's father. And if Charles decides that he wants a closer relationship with his son and grandchildren, there may be very little anyone else can do to prevent that. That is what makes the reported Balmoral invitation so significant. It would demonstrate that Charles is making his own decision about his family. Not necessarily as king, but as a father and grandfather. And that distinction could be incredibly important. Imagine Harry arriving at Balmoral. For the first time in years, he is not simply visiting Britain for an official reason. He is potentially returning to a place deeply associated with his family. And this time, Meghan and the children could potentially be with him. That would create a powerful emotional moment. For Harry, it could mean spending time with his father. For Charles, it could mean seeing his son and grandchildren together. For Archie and Lilibet, it could mean experiencing more of their British family history. But for William and Catherine, if the reports are accurate, it could create an uncomfortable situation. Because they would have to decide how they respond to a family dynamic they may not have wanted. And that brings us to the biggest question. Could Charles' relationship with Harry actually move forward without William's approval? The answer may be yes. The king has his own relationship with the son. And there is no indication that Charles is prepared to permanently distance himself from Harry simply because the brothers remain estranged. In fact, recent developments suggest that Charles may be taking a much more personal approach. The king's relationship with Harry does not necessarily have to depend on William and Harry reconciling first. That could be an important change. For years, it may have seemed as though the entire family had to move together. But perhaps that is no longer realistic. Perhaps reconciliation will happen one relationship at a time. Charles and Harry first. Then perhaps Charles and Meghan. Then potentially the grandchildren. And only later, if circumstances allow, William and Harry. If that is the path being taken, it would be a much slower and more cautious form of reconciliation. But it could also be more realistic. Because forcing two estranged brothers into a public reconciliation could easily create more tension. Allowing a father and son to rebuild their relationship privately may be much easier. And that could explain why Balmoral matters. It is private. It is family-oriented. And it provides an environment where Charles and Harry could potentially spend time together without the pressure of a formal royal ceremony. But there is another possibility. What if Meghan's presence changes the entire dynamic? The report suggests that Meghan would view Charles's willingness to reconnect as a major development. If she and Harry attend Balmoral, Meghan could potentially feel that the family is finally acknowledging a relationship with the Sussexes that cannot simply be ignored. And for Meghan, the most important part may not even be her own relationship with the royal family. It could be Harry's relationship with his father. And the relationship between Charles and his grandchildren. Because Archie and Lilibet have grown up largely outside the British royal environment. Their connection to their grandfather is naturally different from that of William's children, who have grown up much closer to the center of rural life. A Balmoral gathering could therefore be emotionally significant for the next generation. But it would also bring enormous attention. If Harry, Meghan and their children were seen at Balmoral, the story would immediately become global news. Every photograph would be analyzed. Every interaction would be studied. And once again, the family would find itself under a microscope. That is the paradox of reconciliation. The family may need privacy to rebuild. But the moment that reconciliation becomes public, the world wants to see it. And that could make the alleged Balmoral invitation both an opportunity and a risk. There's also the question of William and Catherine. If they were present at the same gathering, the stakes would become even higher. Harry and William could potentially be in the same place. Meghan and Catherine could potentially be in the same place. Their children could potentially be together. And suddenly, the world would be watching for one thing: perfect reconciliation. Not a return to the past, but something different. Something quieter. Something more personal. And perhaps, for Harry and Meghan, something they have wanted for years. A place inside the family without having to return to the institution. The biggest question now is whether William and Catherine will ultimately accept their new reality. Because if Charles continues opening the door to Harry and his grandchildren, the balance inside the family could change permanently. The future king may remain distant from his brother. The current king may grow closer to him. And the Sussex children may gradually become more connected to their grandfather. That would create an extraordinary royal situation. Two brothers living very different lives. One father trying to maintain relationships with both. And a new generation growing up between two sides of the same family. For now, the alleged Balmoral invitation remains just that, an allegation that has not been publicly confirmed. But the larger question is already here. Can King Charles build a relationship with Harry without waiting for William to reconcile with his brother? Can Meghan accept a return to Britain without reopening every old conflict? Can Harry maintain a relationship with his father while continuing to live outside the monarchy? And perhaps,